give me some vibe music. Give me some vibe music for my announcement. Hey, we are. Hey, Doobie Brothers, can you just calm down for a minute? Yeah. We've got a packed house. I am not surprised whatsoever. This is kind of what we thought would happen because this is just who Eric was. So we're glad that you're here. If there is any available space, we'd love for you to scoot to the wall as best you can. It looks like there's not a lot. At this point, we're going to kind of try to squeeze in a few more people. So if you have any open spots, just let us know. We're going to try to squeeze a few people in. Back to you. That's some good tunes right there. Well, good afternoon. My name is Mike Klein. I am the lead pastor here at Mountain View Church. And Eric was a devoted member here for 34 years. And so even though we knew that it could be a little overwhelming for our building and our parking, I hope most of you got to park in the town of Almsville. That was kind of the goal. So hopefully that worked out okay. It just felt like this is what he would want, right? This is what we talked about. And so I think it's a fitting tribute to him already. On behalf of his wife, Paula, and the rest of the family here in the front, I just want to thank you for making it a priority to be here, for putting it on your calendar, for carving out the time, and coming to pay your respects and to honor the legacy of a devoted husband, a loving father, a loyal friend, and a faithful follower of Jesus. Eric Lloyd Larson. Let me open us up with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, God of all comfort and compassion, we gather in your presence today to remember and pay tribute to someone that meant so much to us. And we call events like these celebrations of life, but we also acknowledge in a very real way that we are mourning a death. And so we ask for your comfort and the peace that only comes from you. You are not a God that shies away from big emotions or hard moments. In fact, you stepped into the pain of this world, have experienced it yourself, and overcome it. But we also sit here, Lord, assured of your boundless love and grace for us and for Eric. You not only stepped into that pain, but you changed it, you transformed it. And so help us today to truly celebrate the gift of life, the gift that was Eric. And as I shared with the family before we walked in here, Lord, you knew Eric before any of us. He is your beloved son. And it was you who made him the special person that he was. And so as we celebrate his life and his legacy, we are also honoring you for the gift that you gave us in Eric. And so we pray that you would help us to do that well today, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to open up with some music, which is exactly what Eric would want us to do. His kids are going to come and lead us in a couple of songs. So why don't you guys come up? We're going to have the lyrics on there if you want to sing. If you want to just reflect, that's okay as well. But we want to worship together.
Breathe the air of heaven. Pain is gone and mercy fills the street. To look upon the one who bled to save me. Walk with him for all eternity. There will be a day when all will bow before him. There will be a day when death will be no more. Standing face to face with he who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. every prayer we prayed in desperation, the songs of faith we sang through doubt and fear, and in the end we'll see that it was worth it. He returns to wipe away our fears. There will be a day when all will bow before Him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with He who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. And with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Sing that one more time. That day, we join the resurrection and stand beside the heroes of the faith. And with one voice, 1,000 generations sing, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Forever He shall reign. Let it be today. We shout the hymn of heaven. The angels and the saints, we raise a mighty roar. Glory to our God, who gave His life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. Grand earth is quaked before, moved by the sound of His voice. Seas that are shaken and stirred, that can be calmed and broken from my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on You. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on You. It is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And it is well. It is well. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and winds still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and winds still know His name. The waves and winds still know His name. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. 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 It is well. It is well with my soul. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know.
Well, officiating funerals is one of the real privileges of being a pastor, and I do mean that. Not every service is created equal for me, right? There are always ones where every funeral is on behalf of someone who is dearly loved by others, someone who's created in the image of God, someone who will no doubt be missed by many people. But there's a real difference, at least for me, when I'm officiating a service for someone I never got the chance to know really well, and someone like Eric. My wife and I were talking this week and just about this service, about what to share, and she said this to me, and it's true. You know, if you stay at a church long enough, eventually you'll find yourself doing the eulogy for a good friend. And that's true. That's the case. And on the one hand, it's harder because the emotions are more raw for me personally. But on the other hand, it's easier because I have personal material to work with. I don't have to rely on secondhand information when it comes to Eric. Though I did enjoy sitting down with you guys and talking with the family this week, getting to know Eric through their eyes and some of the stories they shared. Because like without that time together, without you guys, I would never have known that Eric really loved playing with his sissy's Barbies when he was a kid. Or that he carried the nickname Larson. I don't... There's going to be a story time later, and I am trusting one of you to fill in the gaps for that one. I need to know where that came from. No one can arrest him now. It's totally fine. It's no worries. But they shared lots of things with me that I did already know, like Eric's love for music. That's why we've heavily featured that already today. Eric was a musician through and through. He's a staple on our worship team on this stage for decades. Played with a lot of different worship leaders and pastors over the years. These drums up here were his. He never asked for them back, so we just kept using them. I have no idea how long we've had them. I could be wrong. I think back there in the sound booth, I think we're still running an amp that we borrowed 25 years ago, maybe, and we should probably change it out before it blows up. But it's been reliable, you know. And I thought about that this week. Like, that is so fitting for something that Eric would donate, that it would just work. It would just show up, and you could trust it and count on it, because that's who Eric was. Eric had a really quirky sense of humor, a bit nerdy, like Monty Python style. There's a number of times we'd be gathered across the hallway in room 1, supposedly there to go over the service order and to pray, you know, like spiritual things. And Eric would always just tell a joke or say something that changed the tone of the entire moment, and I'd have to rein everybody back in. But he was just funny, and he wasn't afraid to be himself. He was very comfortable with who God created him to be. And I think that was part of what I told the family. I think Eric is someone I would look at and say he has a non-anxious presence about him. And I think a lot of that stemmed from being comfortable in his own skin and being confident in who God made him to be. And our whole church culture and our worship team culture, a lot of that has come from Eric. In a few minutes, we're going to have the family share, and you're going to get a chance to jump in on that fun as well. So you might start to think now what you would want to share. For me, I think Eric's lasting legacy in my life was as an encourager. Eric was a pastor's dream. In fact, we have 3 or 4 former pastors of Eric's here and have traveled a long way to get here. And I think it's because of that. I think it's a testament of his legacy. Not every, I got to be careful here, this is being recorded. Not every church member is a pastor's dream. Just going to say it. Just going to say it. Yeah. Eric was. Eric was the kind of person you want in your church and you want on your board. and you want in leadership, which is why he served on our board so many different times. But he had a real gift at knowing when you needed encouragement and when you needed a pick-me-up. When I found out he had passed away, I immediately went through my emails and I typed in his name and started looking at our correspondence over the last few years. And there's two basic categories of emails that I had with Eric. Category 1 was, something's weird with our books. Can you please come and help us? Because Eric was, even though he didn't love accounting, he was really good at it. And there was a lot of times where he'd need to come in and rescue us and help us figure out where we'd gotten confused. That was the first category. The second category, though, is the ones I'll remember. And they're the ones that I'm going to save forever. Where he would, I think, sense that I needed encouragement, and he would give it. He would just pour life into me. There's two different kinds of people in this world, right? There's people that kind of just, you leave the room and you're kind of like, I'm glad that's over, you know? And then there's other people that you're like, man, I'm walking lighter because I spent time with this person. Like they actually add life to me rather than suck it away. And Eric added life to people. I want to read one of the emails he sent me. He sent me this email in December of 2020. Pretty easy year. No big deal. Can't imagine why a pastor would need an encouraging email. Here's what he wrote. Mike, I know you're not a pat myself on the back kind of guy, but I feel compelled to tell you, you've done a great job in this sucky year. You've navigated the confusing rules of the state and kept this church moving. New believers are now a part of Mountain View's history. Baptisms were celebrated during a year even like this. Tithing didn't fall, but somehow grew. We were a hub of the Canyon Fire relief efforts, and instrumental in Tesla investing in the canyon. You always helped people in need. You have brought forth the word of God without fail, even in the days you thought you didn't hit it or thought no one was listening or watching. You've kept your family safe and your marriage strong. You've done things for the Lord that only He knows about. You've been a faithful steward of this church's resources as well as your own. Take courage, young Jedi. With every storm, you get stronger in faith. Did I say Jedi? Yes. Who says Luke wasn't a Christian? George Lucas didn't think it through. Mike, you deserve a vacation, so take one. And remember, you are employed by Jesus, and He's got a great pension and family plan. Cheers to you. Now, I share that Eric is right. I really don't care for the kudos, so I don't share that for you to remember what he said about me or our church. I want you to remember how he said it. Right? Eric was always specific in his praise. He was always specific about his encouragement. It wasn't just a general like, hey, you're doing a good job. It was like, now let me take the time, which means he took the time to think about it. And let me say some really specific things I'm proud of you in, or that I see in you, or that I want to encourage you about. It wasn't just a generic, like, hey, way to go. It was a really personal, specific, and timely word of encouragement. I want to be more like that. Right, that's Eric's legacy in my life. One of the ways I'm going to honor his life is I want to be more of a specific encourager. The last thing I want to share about is Eric's faith. We're in this church for a reason today. You know, he wasn't the most rah-rah, expressive worshiper. Even though he was one of our most dedicated worship members, he actually, when I used to actually lead the music here, he actually told me, like, to be honest, Mike, I don't like most of the songs we play. They were not his style. They were not, his style was more what was being played before I got up here, right? And he wasn't the kind of person that was going to walk around and hand a gospel tract to a stranger, you know, and that kind of thing. But his love for God ran deep. And he was grounded in his word. Eric would slip scripture or like allusions to scripture and references to scripture in random conversations seamlessly. Like he had eaten the word. It was just a part of who he was. So he didn't need to be a Bible thumper or anything like that. It just kind of oozed out of his pores. And like so much of his faith, there was just this steady, again, non-anxious nature to his walk with God. He knew what he knew, and he was okay with that. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 and 14 says, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him." So Paul says here, he says everybody dies. Right? Death is inevitable. Death is hard. And because of that, grief is. Like, grief is a thing that all of us experience. It just is. But the way you grieve, Paul says, is fundamentally shaped by what you believe. And not everybody grieves the same, Paul says. He says, "I do not want you to grieve like the rest of mankind." He says, when you're a follower of Jesus, you grieve right alongside this other big word, hope. You grieve, you feel it, it hurts, but you grieve with hope. In another scene, it was actually at a funeral where people were mourning the death of their brother, Lazarus, that Jesus enters the scene, and he says these words to those who are gathered, who are mourning, who are crying, who are grieving. Jesus shows up and he says, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? Man, that's a loaded question. Do you believe this? Eric did. With all of his heart, Eric believed that. And that's why, even though we mourn and we grieve differently. We grieve with hope because we believe in the promise of that passage. That because of Jesus, right now, as we sit here and we honor him and we remember him, Eric is in the presence of God. And he is experiencing the reward of eternity that he longed for, that he talked about more and more, especially the last few years. His family is there. It's like Dad had 1 foot in heaven, his daughter told me. Well, now he's got 2 feet in heaven. And I've never been there. I can't tell you exactly what it's like, and I'm not in a hurry. But I saw a post this week that I think sums up the hope of heaven perfectly. It said that heaven is progress without setbacks. Heaven is adventure without exhaustion. Pleasure without regret. Relationships without heartache. Family without funerals. And life without pain. That's what heaven is. And because of Jesus, thanks to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, that is available to everybody. What an amazing gift. Right? And I know that Eric's going to be there. He's going to be waiting on us. He's probably going to have a corny joke or two. I don't know if corny jokes are allowed in heaven. I think so. And he'd want all of us to join him. And he'd want me to tell you that. Well, we're going to have a time of sharing. First, we're going to ask a few family members to share. You guys are going to get a chance in a little bit. But Brittany, why don't you come back up and share with us?
Sorry, apparently you still have to be a parent on events like this, so sorry about that. So I just wanted to share just a piece of my dad with you guys, just a piece that it's hard for all of us to obviously get up here, but you all knew him in your own ways, and we just loved him so much, and so I just wanted to share just the gifts that Dad gave us. My dad was one of the most generous people I knew. And while that generosity was definitely financially, it was also spread into every other area of his life. And while I could go on and on describing who my dad was, I just wanted to share some of the parts of him that we love the most, that we will miss and cherish the most. So time. My dad gave us the gift of his presence. And time was very limited and very precious because of how much he had on his plate. He was a man of many, many, many hobbies and commitments. But as I look back over my own life, I can see that he always showed up exactly when we needed him. Sometimes it was time alone, just the two of us. Every year he would take me on a Christmas date. As the years, like the later years, we'd go to Bentley's and sit by the fire and just sit there for hours and just talk and laugh. And he would just listen to every word I said as if I was the coolest, most incredible person on the planet. He just made everybody just feel loved and seen and so important. He was just very present. But as we got older, it grew into us mostly just spending time on the couch for hours. And I think anybody outside of our family could have been like, this is it? This is what we're doing? But we would just sit and talk and laugh and tell or listen to his stories. He was just very present. He gave us his precious time. Even a few months ago, while I was down visiting with the kids, I came down to his office where he was working, and I popped my head in, and he still, even though he was so busy, he just said, "Hi, honey, I've got a moment for you." And that was just my dad. That was who he was. Or even in the yard where he was in his zone and he was busy, he would still just have time. My dad also gave us a lot of laughs. He had the best, quirkiest sense of humor, and you'll hear a lot about that, I think, today. He always had us laughing or shaking our heads with what came out of his mouth because we were like, but he was just silly. He was goofy. That's just something I think he's given to each one of us kids a little bit too. My childhood does consist of a lot of silly movies, silly shows, Monty Python. I probably shouldn't say it, but I never understood it. But Jason and my brothers and Chris, they did. They got that side of him. That was good. He just loved to make us laugh. And I know one of the things we'll miss the most is hearing him laughing on the couch. Downstairs, even if we weren't around, his heckle or his giggle. I don't even know, that high-pitched, he's just losing it laughter. He was just the best. And even when life was hard or something happened, he would always say something that just kind of reminded us, like, this is just life. And sometimes it sucks, but there's something to laugh about. My dad was full of wisdom. He just had so much of it. He always had the right thing to say. Just a few months ago, I remember just feeling weary and just confused because being an adult is hard. Being a human is hard. And I just remember calling him. I just wanted to hear his voice. And it was mid-work day. I know he was busy, but he picked up the phone, and I don't really remember much of what we talked about other than the fact that he just said, like, it's okay, and things will take time, and it'll get better. And I just feel like that is just honestly what he would say. Like, sometimes things are hard, but they always get better. Anybody that knows my dad knows he loved his yard. That was his place. He was a master gardener. This was his heaven on earth. A passion that I've come to love and will now carry on as a legacy, because that was mostly what we talked about. We would just talk about all the things, shrubs and grass and dirt and flowers. And it's just things that most people probably find weird, but we just loved it. He grew the best beets. His raspberries and blackberries were massive. His roses were beautiful. He loved growing grapes for winemaking, which was another hobby he didn't have time for. He loved his grass. He loved the smell of fresh cut grass. He was a slave after that lawn, but he loved it so much. And I know that he's a master gardener in heaven right now, and I look forward to joining him. someday. Music. Music was another gift. His music, he gave us kids all the gift of music in different ways. That's just all we knew. We love it in just the ways that, I don't know, just different pieces of my dad. All we ever knew was guitars and bands and drums and shows and loud music and concerts I probably didn't need to go to at like 13. We knew Vince Gill and Rush and drum videos. Even my kids, like over the last few years, he was never really on his phone checked out doing anything but drum videos. That was it. Just always mastering his craft forever. And I know there was a time that my dad probably wanted to be a famous rock star, but he was settling in being content with being a dad and a husband. But he never gave up that gift of music. And we see it in my kids already, and this legacy of the music is just only beginning. I can't really get up here and talk about all these other things that Dad gave us without talking about the fact that the most important thing to my dad was Jesus. That was the greatest gift that he gave us. My dad loved being a follower of Jesus. He loved reading the Bible every day. He literally read it through, 20 years? And even, you could say the most obscure, random story that you would read and be like, yeah, I don't understand that. And he'd go, oh, yeah, I know that story. And he'd give you the details as if he just read that. He knew God's word. It just lived in him. So he gave me the greatest gift of my life of teaching me about who Jesus is. And he wasn't a religious man full of rules and regulations and all these things. He just loved Jesus. He was a normal human that just loved following Jesus and being like him. And that is where his peace came from. He knew heaven was his home. He would always remind us that we're just a renter here. We're a tenant with this body. He would always say it to the point where we'd be like, Dad, we love you. You're fun. You're the best dad. We don't want you to go. And he'd always be like, but it's fine. Heaven is our home. We're good. So I just think that's also a gift, though. He was just content. He was content here, but yet he knew this wasn't home. And I know one day we'll go home to heaven and be with him. And he also loved the church. He loved this church. He loved the people of this church, not just the building. He was here for 34, I don't know, my whole life, 34 years, which is pretty wild because that just doesn't happen nowadays. He loved this church, and he was so committed to this place and the pastors and the leaders, even when things were really hard and he had to walk through really hard stuff and most people would peace out. But he stayed. He was devoted to this place. He was committed. And I feel like that is one of the most incredible gifts for me and my family as well. He was forgiving and full of grace. He gave me the greatest gift of getting to be raised here at this church and with this family. And teaching me that the one that created us all is in control of it all. So while we ache for him here, we know he's really living his best retirement in heaven. And yet we still have God with us because of the gift that my dad gave us. So as I wrap this up, these are just barely any of the main gifts that he gave us, but I don't need to take all day. I know. But we get to carry so many incredible memories, and these are literally just little snapshots. But summer in the pool, story after story, his stories were so good. Fire pits and s'mores, endless camping trips, drives to Nebraska. He built us a castle when we were kids, a literal little castle in the backyard, and it was so cool, full of spiders. But it was, it's a castle. He had burn piles every fall that we were always kind of nervous about, but he loved it. He had cherry tomatoes and blueberries that we could feast on while playing outside. We always would talk in the hot tub for 2 hours just about life. Text responses in one sentence from him. As you can tell, I probably had a whole paragraph, but he would always respond. It was just simple and sweet and to the point. I remember seeing him sitting up late at night in the hotel when we would drive to Nebraska, and he would be writing a book And it's something we haven't even read, but we probably should. He would play his guitar on the back porch on warm summer nights, and I just remember falling asleep, just hearing him, tapping his foot to keep the beat, and it would just sound so beautiful. My dad also, he could fix everything. Like, I literally thought every dad could fix everything, could do anything. But I also thought every dad was really good at shredding the guitar and playing the drums. He was pretty cool. He always had time for a movie and dinner. And Friday nights with my parents in high school, honestly, were just the best. They were incredible. I just loved being with them. I think that's one of the things with all of us. Like, we just love to be in his presence. We just like to be with him. His calm presence was amazing in the hard moments. His hugs were the best. He always smelled good, always had cologne on, and he would buy a new cologne for every trip. So now when we smell him, it's like, oh, that was Cancun, or that one's Hawaii, or whatever. But I loved it. Memories came through scent with him. We went to endless concerts, and we're so thankful for Chris to going to even like all the other concerts that I probably wouldn't enjoy. So thank you. Chris was a son to Dad. He was a son that came in, and he's just a part of our family as well. I love thinking back on the drives that we would take, like youth group. I'd come to youth group, he'd pick us up, and the drive home, he would have all the windows down, super loud, intense music, and he was just full of joy. The wind blowing in his hair, like it was just so fun. And he just would laugh. He laughed and laughed. He also loved to spoil Mom with gift cards every Christmas, and she'd be like, honey, let's just keep it slow, a little bit smaller this year. And he would blow her up because he knew she didn't want to spend money on herself throughout the year. So he would just bless her with just the funnest Christmas mornings. I also just loved how my dad made coffee for my mom every morning. He just loved her so well. And every Friday, he'd bring her a little coffee from a coffee shop. One of the greatest gifts was just how my dad loved my mom so selflessly. Even when we'd complain and be like, Mom's being so mean, blah, 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 like you do in high school, he would always just look at us like, yeah, your mom's amazing. So, I don't ever remember him saying anything negative about my mom. Like, he just loved her. And so it's been a gift for Jason and I to always be able to look back on the fact that they give us hope that marriage, even though marriage is hard and it takes work, it's possible to love that person the rest of your life. So lastly, thank you for that, Mom. You're also in that. You married him. So that's good. And I have one more thing to say because I got the mic. Dad loved The Chosen, and my dad watched a lot of things, like all the cool shows. He loved them, but he loved The Chosen. And for years, he would be like, Dane, I'm sure he did it to you. He was always like, you guys got to watch The Chosen. Have you watched it? And we'd be like, no, because Christian things are often really bad. But we finally did, and it's just incredible. It is literally incredible. And so I'm going to say to everybody in here, if you miss my dad at any point, just watch it. Watch it, because I believe that's the Jesus that Dad loved and is with. Right? Oh, not really. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. So anyways, I guess I'm done. But I really want to thank you guys, honestly, for just being here. Every one of you that said we're just blown away with how much people loved my dad. The meals, the calls, the getting together with Mom, like helping around the house. Honestly, we were just so blown away with the support. And I just want to thank you for that on behalf of my mom. We're just so thankful for loving our dad. But honestly, keep it up. When you remember him, keep the meals coming. No. When you remember him, when you remember a story, or when you have a memory of something that you love, like we love hearing those things because he loved everybody so well. And I just think one of the greatest things that he did was encourage others. You'll hear it over and over today. We just keep hearing that. So encourage others. If you get a word for somebody that you feel like you want to encourage them, just be an Eric. Send them a text. Send them an email. Because I think when these saints, these incredible people leave us early, we got to pick up where they left off. We got to take some of that and do it here. So thank you so much for being here. We love you guys. We appreciate you. I'm going to be done.
Speaking of concerts you probably shouldn't have gone to, I think my first concert was when I was 8, and it was a Doobie Brothers concert. And I spent the whole night getting beer dumped on my shirt by a groovy dude behind me. So that was sick. Yeah, I think Chris was there. Well, let's see if I can get through this. Ever since I was a little kid, my biggest fear in life has been suddenly losing one of my parents. Through the use of meds, it was subdued slightly, but it was always present. On Tuesday, November 8th, it was just like any other day. I got up to go to work, pushed through the day, and as we were getting ready to wrap it up, I got a call from my brother. I didn't answer. I thought it was just a call that he was just coming to chat, but I noticed that I got a voicemail, which usually means something serious is going on. And you know how iPhone will transcribe it for you? And so I looked, and I managed to see, hey, man, call me as soon as possible. Something's wrong with Dad. Now, as a side note, I've always been a puker. My dad had a really funny story he would share about me when I was a kid. I had just watched another thing he would do is show us shows that we shouldn't have watched when we were little. So probably the same year, beer still on my shirt, I was watching War of the Worlds for the first time, which still scares me to this day. And the power went out. And so my dad turned to Alex and said, I think one of those ships is coming out of the ground out back. And I proceeded to throw up all over the place. If I was nervous, scared, angry, or to my biggest downfall, guilty, I would puke. I could not hide anything from my parents. So jumping back to that day, you're probably thinking I just threw up all over the place like that scene in Stand By Me, but I didn't. I froze. And then I walked to my car, and I screamed and yelled so loud that I still get chills thinking about it. I cursed and I yelled at God. I thought he had lied to me. I have always felt like I've been able to talk with God, not out loud, but been able to discern what I think is his voice and what is my own. And so for a while, this past year, I had been really worried about losing Dad. And I just felt like something was saying, you know, he's going to be here for a while, so don't worry about it. Which I realize was myself saying that. Once the dust had settled and we had come to grips with Dad being gone, we realized something. Dad was tired. Just the week before our church, when we played together for the last time, I remember looking over and just seeing him and thinking, man, he just looks so tired. And worst of all, I thought, you know, this is the first time in my life where I feel like I can take care of myself now. And I really owe that to my career. That's not what I meant, though, you know. I didn't mean, okay, that's cool, just dip out next week. But he had been working his butt off for years, going nonstop. When he wasn't working in the yard, if he was with us or he was with the grandkids, he was helping me figure things out with my home renovation. He was a dedicated father, grandpa, husband, as well as an employee to the state and Tierra Rose. In the past few years, I have been begging Dad to slow down and rest because I wanted him to enjoy retirement. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to retirement here on earth, but he did make it to heaven, and I know that with all the confidence in the world. He's finally able to rest and be in heaven, getting all of life's biggest questions answered. I'm not anxious anymore. I have no fear because my greatest fear has happened. Dad gave me so much, and his final gift was taking my anxiety with him.
You know, I was thinking, Brittany, when you were sharing, Jason, did you have any idea how high the bar was, bro? literally grew up in a castle. Like, mom gets coffee every morning. You must be a pretty good husband. That's all I'm saying. I'm like, the bar was really high. I'm also grateful your dad settled to play music with guys like me and like Don Sturgeon. I mean, good, like us regular guys who had no idea what we were doing. I'm now honored to know that he settled to play with me. So, we're gonna let you guys share as well. Before we do that, we've got some pictures, some slideshows that we would love for everyone to just kind of take in, and then we'll open the floor.
I've still got songs I'm dying to sing, but man, my fingers ache from these old guitar strings. I spend the hours remembering the sands of time are a precious thing. And I've said goodbye to some real good friends, but life looks different through an aging lens. No, I don't question it will end. I'm just more grateful now than I've ever been. Oklahoma and my mom and dad. This gypsy life ain't been so bad. I gave you everything I had. How has life gone by so fast? I sang every song like it could be my last. So many dreams I've yet to cast. I made peace with that looking glass. Get to be your dad. This gypsy life ain't been so bad. I gave you everything I had. This gypsy life ain't been so bad. I gave you everything I had. Oh, I hand them this life to do what they will. They got to find their way from it. Oh, show us the way. If they only knew. Oh, show us the light. Oh, show them what light it shines from within. They make their own day. They make their own night. And sometimes they win. Oh, show us the way. But they always get through. Oh, show us the light. Oh, why do they come and ask for more? They got stars they don't have wishes for. They're just giving up their blame to me. Oh, how do those fools survive? I'm wondering why. I'm wondering how they're gonna bear themselves out now. Oh, give us this day. I'm shaking my head. Oh, keep us tonight. Oh, I hand them this life. Do what they will. They got to make their way from here. Oh, show us the way. If they only knew. Oh, show us the light. Oh, why do they come and ask for more? They got stars they don't have wishes for. They're just giving up their blame to me. Oh, how do the fools survive? It's not like it was before. Not like it was before. When they call, I won't come running. It was so long ago. I left them on their own. Oh, how do those fools survive? Oh, how can they come and ask for more? They got stars they don't have wishes for. They're just giving up their blame to me. Oh, how do the fools survive?
Sheree, thanks for putting that together. That was awesome. To open us up for a time of sharing, I'm going to ask Pastor Dane Jesdahl to come on up. And it would be awesome if you could use this microphone. We'll put you down here so people don't have to at least climb the stage. We are recording this, and it would be awesome if we could hear you. I know it's going to be a little bit difficult for some of you to be able to make it up here, but we're going to do the best we can.
I thought that I was pretty special because Eric was my best friend. And we got together, we've met together, I guess he was my friend for 34 years, and a good friend. We would meet, we loved chains. Believe it or not, we both did. And so we would meet, and then I would talk with Carmen, and I'd go, wow. And having a pastor, to have a best friend is really hard. And then I would talk to Carmen and find out that, Carmen, you guys had a close relationship too and were friends. And then I talked with Mark Schmerzy and found out that you guys had a really close friendship too. And then I talked to Mike and found out Mike and him were pretty close too. And I think what we realize is that Eric was the special guy. One story. It was probably 6 months after I met Eric and he started attending the church in 88, I believe, somewhere around there. And he played the drums, and I found out he played the drums. And it's like, oh, now in 88, you didn't have drums in a church, typically. And he goes, I don't know if drums should be in the church either. And I said, we got to do it. We got to do it. We got a guitarist. We're going to have a drummer. We're going to have a band on Sunday morning. But we're like a church of 30 and mostly older people. I was young and dumb. But I believe may have been the drum kit. I'm not sure. But it was sitting over here. And so that Sunday morning, Eric comes in and sits down, and I feel like introducing him. And so I said, I want everybody to welcome Eric Larson on the drums. And he ripped off a drum solo on Sunday morning when I was trying to be gentle. That's Eric.
Who would like to come and share? We won't all get a chance today, but we want to leave a good amount of time here for people to share. Just come on up whenever you're ready. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, today's a lot harder than I thought it would be. But just grateful for Eric. He was like a dad, and he showed me love, and he showed me friendship. And we got a new son. You got to meet him, and I'm grateful for that. And his advice, I'll just tell a quick story. But his advice just for driving, he told me, "No, buddy, you're going to go crazy when that kid's crying in the car. You're going to drive 100 miles an hour to get to where you're going as fast as you can." And he's like, "But just, the ear muffs you use when mowing lawns. He's like, just keep those in your car. And you just put those on while you're driving, and Kara can take care of the kid, and you won't go crazy, So you just do that." But grateful, again, for his friendship and just that God brought him into my life. And we saw so many concerts. And whether it was going to see Porcupine Tree, which was the stuff that the kids didn't want to see, it was heavier. But I drag them out and just after every concert, making them stay late. Let's try to meet this guy. And he'd probably tell a story that we waited out there after a show for 2 hours, 3 hours before he came out. It was like 45 minutes. But Eric would just blow these stories up, and I'd say, Eric, just never let the truth get in the way of a good story, And so, but I'll always be grateful. We got to meet Vince Gill together and had the greatest time. And so just those 2 days we got to meet him and hang out with him, and we ate fair food and gained more weight in 2 days than we ever thought we imagined we could. And, I lost parents at a young age, and that didn't really affect me because Eric stepped in at just the right time and gave me that fatherly advice that I needed. So, thanks.
I'll jump up. I know a bunch of you know. My name is Mark Schmerzy. I'm part of the parade of pastors that Eric had in his life. And it is true. I said always, Eric was one of my top 3 encouragers in my life for my whole life. And that's such a gift. He was that kind of person through and through. And the story needs to be told. He was instrumental in me coming to the church. He was in the vice chair role. So back summer 2009 when the church was looking for a pastor, Eric was kind of in charge of that search process. But I remember the story needs to be told of how Eric got to the church, because I asked a number of you who were part of the church, oh, hey, how'd you end up at a church? And Eric's story was, I was at a party at somebody's house hanging out in the backyard when I met Dane Jesdahl. And Dane was the pastor, and he goes, well, I'm standing in the backyard, and I've got a beer in my hand, and I'm talking to Dane, and then Dane tells me he's a pastor. And he instinctively, upon hearing that he was a pastor, throws his beer in the bushes. He didn't even say anything, and he tried to play it off like he didn't have it. Right in front of Dane. And Eric still says, I don't know why I did that. It just happened. It just came out of my hand. And that's when he first met you, evidently, Dane. I don't know, the truth may have been, I don't know all the details of that verified, and became part of the church after that. And Eric was, the verse that's come to mind for me in 1 Peter 2:5, it talks about how people of the church are like living stones. And I think part of that picture of how we're like living stones is because Eric was somebody, and this was the phrase I remember that summer of 2009 when we were praying about coming to the church. And I remember saying to my wife, Jessica, people like Eric and Paul are people we can build with. God can do something here. They really love Jesus. They really love people. And they have the faith. And these are people you can build with. And I think that verse of being like a living stone was knowing that so much of what God built was reaching more people, reaching into your lives and doing those things. It was because of somebody like Eric who, we've talked about things like his committed, his consistent presence. I mean, we laid tile in the women's bathroom floor together, and then he'd do the books, and then he'd play drums. And that was just, he was that committed, consistent presence, but he cared for people, and he was committed to Christ. And those things were just so great. What I'll probably always remember the most is those times where we'd take communion, and Eric playing drums would just so smoothly, I'd on stage as pastor, he'd take the elements over to him, and he would be playing the drums, and he'd somehow set one drumstick down, and then reach over and take an element of communion, all while never missing a beat. And it was just his smooth, he could just play it all that way. And it was a beautiful thing. But he loved the people of this church. He loved those of you in this room. His heart for Jesus and commitment for Christ. What God's done in so many of our lives is because of Eric and people like him and their faithfulness to follow Christ and be committed to the church. And so I just love him deeply, love you guys. And this whole room is so grateful for the influence he's had.
I'm Jason. I married Brittany back in 2009. I actually met the family in 2007. And before we started dating, I wanted to ask for permission from Eric because that's just how I was raised. And Moose and Julia, we went camping with them. And when my car pulled up, he goes, "Oh, so here's Mr. Wonderful." And I was like, well, great introduction. But and so what was amazing about my relationship with Eric was that he truly was a father to me. And just like all the other pastors in here, he was a huge encouragement to me on a regular basis. The last thing he ever said to me was he stayed home from church the Sunday before he passed away, and he sent me a text message that morning. I was leading worship, and he just said, "Man, you guys did such a good job. I forgot how great your voice is." And, that was just so encouraging. He didn't have to do that, and he and I didn't communicate on a super regular basis, but that's just not who he was. He didn't want me to call him and chat him up for 30 minutes every week or something. That just wasn't what our relationship was. But when we were together, we'd talk for hours, just about anything, and we had so much in common. I really believe that God just especially put him in my life, and that I couldn't have had a better father-in-law. And what was amazing is that when I asked for Brittany's hand in marriage, he said to me, it was on another camping trip, and the girls had gone off to go for a walk, so I asked him, and he was like, "Oh man, you're asking me now? I thought you were going to ask me like 6 months ago when we were talking before." And he's like, "You had my permission then." And I was like, "Really? You just met me?" He's like, "Yeah, but after the first meeting with you," he's like, "I just knew. I knew you were a good guy." And so, that just he could read people well, and I just he was an amazing encouragement for me, and just such a blessing to my kids. And one of the things that I've been just reflecting on and talking about is just how he lavished his time, he lavished his finances. He was never short in anything. He never skimped off the top. He did everything the right way. He didn't buy one power drill, he bought 3. He had 4 or 5, vacuums in his shop. Like, he was not somebody who skimped, and that's just who he was. If he said he was, one time when I first met them, I tried to pay for dinner. I even asked the waitress for the bill, and he got mad at me. He was like, "Are you kidding?" And then, he wouldn't let me pay for anything for a really long time, but that's just who he was. He was so incredibly generous. And I just, that's just one thing that'll stick with me for a really long time. And I would say, for just reemphasizing, there's so much that goes into being a part of a church community. And I'm a pastor's kid. I've grown up in the church. I've seen the highs and lows. And you can't have churches without dedicated people. And you can't have churches without people who are willing to serve and sacrifice their money, sacrifice their time, and serve the Lord. And the example that he set for this community is obvious by everybody here. But I would just encourage you to continue to carry that on, because the world needs the church. And the waves and winds still know his name. Even though people are tossed and turned on a daily basis, the waves and winds still know his name. And the world needs the church. They need the gospel. They need to hear the good news.
Hi, everyone. My name is Terry, and I've been a lifelong friend of Eric and Tricia. And their parents were building their house out there on the Silver Falls Highway at the same time that my parents were building our place. And we would go out, our family, to work on the property and work on the house. And the first time I met Eric, he was probably 5 years old. And I would have been 7. And as a 7-year-old, it was my job to sweep all the nails and the sawdust as they were framing the house. And I happened to look over, and I saw this little boy over there with a little truck playing on a dirt pile. And I looked at my mom, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, who's that?" And she's like, "I don't know, but maybe you should go meet him." And so I went over and introduced myself, and Eric and I became instant friends. And I have wonderful childhood memories of growing up with Eric. The things that you guys talk about, his wacky sense of humor and his uncontrollable giggling, those things were with him as a very young child. He always amazed me. he would just burst out giggling at something that you wouldn't even know that was funny, but he just thought it was so hilarious. Eric, I remember Eric's drum set, that glittery green drum set. I don't know if he still has that or not, but I was always impressed with Eric and his drumming, and we were both musical. And Eric was a lefty. I'm a left-hander too, but although I play all my instruments right-handed. So Eric taught me how to play drums, probably in a left-handed way, which is kind of funny, because I wouldn't think of drumming left-handed now. But and I taught Eric on the things that I was learning on guitar. And it was interesting because I think back then left-handed guitars were kind of hard to come by and expensive. So I believe Eric flipped his guitar over and strung it backwards, which was quite interesting for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm teaching this, but it made sense when we looked at each other and mirrored each other. It made sense. Great guy, lifelong friend, and miss him greatly. We're so blessed to have Josh and Miranda as neighbors now. I ended up buying the house that my parents built, and so my husband and I have lived out there for 35 years. And so real close to Darcy and Tricia. And so when Josh and Miranda, we learned that they were going to take over the house, we were like, yes. We were so thrilled about that. So we're here for you guys. If you need anything, Lee's out there with his tractor, whatever you need.
Hi, I'm Lori. I'm here with a group from Tierra Rose, where Eric worked with us for 30 years. My sisters, Sherry and Shelley, are here, and Zach and Leanne, and we all worked side by side with him forever. I was trying to remember when I was talking with Monica and Linda from Marion Estates when I first met him, and I think most of you will relate that from your 20s and then you get married and have kids, all these years start blurring together. But I'm narrowing it down to 83, 84, sometime in that range, when we would spend a lot of time at Maurice's house out in Kaiser at the swimming pool and doing things there. And it was so fun. It was so carefree. And those are such fond memories. Eric was one of the kindest people I've ever known. We trusted him implicitly. He had all of access to anything because it didn't matter. It was Eric. He was family. And I miss him, and I miss his heart. We had different journeys. Our spiritual lives are very different. Our political beliefs are very, very different, and it didn't matter. We embraced each other, and he'd send me songs, text me stuff about business, and then he'd say, hey, listen to this. I think you'd like it. I haven't had a chance to go through all the texts because it's a little hard right now, but I'll never forget the one thing that many things stand out. One thing that stood out when it must have been a Thursday, because he usually came in Thursday evenings to our work after he was done with the state, and John McCain had just announced that Sarah Palin was his running mate, and he couldn't wait to tell me. It was like as soon as I came out of my office, and he's like, Lori, like there was finally going to be this connection with us. Like, we've got a girl. You've got to embrace this. And I remember looking at him because sometimes I just couldn't tell if he was serious or not. And he said, he looked at me and he was so excited and so like, now. And I said, Eric, do you know anything about her? And he goes, well, she's a woman. But it was just who he was. And we laughed. There was never a time at the office. We did get work done once in a while, but there was never a time that one of the kids' names didn't come up or Paula's name didn't come up. And it was with joy and pride that he always spoke of all of you. One of my best friends also graduated from Cascade with Eric, and so we had a common friend over the years. And it's so strange because that friend, Todd, is also somebody that I admire and trust with everything in my life, and they are two of the kindest people I've ever known. So I don't know what went on to you Cascade graduates, but something out there that is very special, and I will always have a special place in my heart for Eric, and he is very, very missed. Thanks.
I want to say it's very fitting that we've got some landscaping going on during Eric's service. Maybe they could be a little louder, that'd be great.
It's still been really hard to accept where we're at right now. I want to speak to all of us, but I mean, family. By the way, I'm Rob, just a friend of Eric's for about the past 5 years. I go to church here at Mountain View and have served with him week in and week out. Eric's legacy is something I want to continue to strive for. I'm an educator, and one of the reasons I love education is this idea of being a forever learner. And that was Eric. No matter what he was passionate about, and Paula, thank you for encouraging Eric's hobbies or allowing him the space to explore those. He was the kind of friend who would text me out of the blue 3 months. You know, I see him at church all the time, and I just get a text and he'd say, Rob, I saw this video on YouTube, you should check it out. And I don't think any other person would want to watch that video, but I loved every moment of the 51-minute documentary he sent me. The best example that I could give would be Parsons. Right now, I don't know where you're at. Aaron, there you are. So Aaron, on our worship team, he plays on a ampless electric guitar pedal board. And I can remember Eric talking to me, and every time Eric would come in with this Helix pedal board, be like, I'm saving up for one of those. I'm, lavishing. And then he had just got one, I think maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And he was so excited to have it. And I actually bought one 2 years ago, but I still haven't installed it. And it's for the high school I teach at. But he would text me these videos on YouTube like, Rob, check out this video about the Helix. And so I just want to share with the family, thank you for always encouraging him to explore his love and his passions, because he gave that to everyone else as well. And that's something I want to continue to strive to do into my adult years. And then spiritually as well. He would always text a scripture or some form of encouragement as we were going through trials in life, and just, I'm thinking of you. Not just everyone, but like, Rob, this one's for you right now. And so fellow believers that are here, when the Holy Spirit encourages us to say, how are you doing? Eric would ask, but more importantly, he would listen, right? And you shared that as well, Brittany. He knew when to talk and he knew when to listen. And that's something I still need to work on. But I'm glad that he could help remind me of that here on earth. So I miss Eric dearly. And thank you everyone who has shared your love for him today and honoring him by being here. Eric was a wonderful man. Thank you.
I want to tell you about my best friend. Wasn't he that way to all of us, though? That's what you're saying. So I have the privilege of being Eric's friend for 25 years or more. And I'm so grateful for the people who shared stories. And I'm not going to try to one-up anyone here in this room because every one of the stories matter. They all matter. I shared something with Paula this morning. I think it was this morning. You know, people think about all the friends that they have in your life, and the miracle isn't having hundreds of friends. It's having one friend who won't walk out when 100 or more are against you. That was Eric. That was Eric. There were multiple times we would sit in his car and listen to very bad music. Not bad because the quality wasn't there, but most of you in this room would shake your head and go, I don't understand why you like that music. And we would listen, and whatever might have been going on in our lives, we might shed a little bit of tears, and then we'd look at each other, and he'd turn the stereo up a little bit more, and then we'd get together the next day. Someone said earlier about the text messages, it has been almost 14 years since we pastored here. Almost every month over the past few years, I would get a text from Eric, and he would encourage. And most of the time it resulted in a phone call that started with laughter because of one of the silly jokes that he had sent or something that prompted that. But that was Eric. And a couple weeks ago, I was grieving and I was crying out to God because my friend isn't around anymore. And I heard God say this because I was asking for another Eric in my life. And God said, no, be an Eric to someone else. Go be that guy. Listen, encourage, love them. Be all in when you're there with them in that moment. And for us here in this room, I think that's what Eric would want to say back to us. Just be that friend to someone else. Because if the world had more people like Eric who were friends to someone else, I think the world would be a better place. And one last thing, I think heaven's going to be a little bit like what we experienced. A couple lead guitars playing music before church started and all that. And I was thinking about how every one of us probably in this room are thinking about the day that we get to be reunited with Eric. But Eric would tell us, oh, don't come see me first. I'm not who you want to see first. It's the one who gave his life for you. That's who you want to see. It's who you want to go see first. And so, I look forward to sitting down and listening to Eric. But I can't wait to see Jesus. And if you don't know Jesus, if you don't know him today like Eric knew him, you need to make that right. You need to get to know Jesus. Because that's the reason why Eric was who he was, is because of Jesus. Let me pray. Father, the pain is real because the friendship is so special. And so we thank you for the tears that have been shed before today and the tears that will be shed afterwards, because that just meant how important Eric was to each one of us here in this room. But it wouldn't mean a whole lot if when we leave here, there's nothing that changes in our life. And so, Father, may each of us here be motivated in some way or other to not just be more like Eric, although that would be an incredible accomplishment. But ultimately, Eric would say, no, it's not about me. Be like Jesus. Get to know him. Live your life for him. Plan a retirement so that you get to spend all of eternity with him. That's the most important thing. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to know Eric. And I believe because I know Eric, I know more about Jesus. And so thank you for that, Father. Thank you for those of us here in this room. And thank you for the incredible blessing that Eric was to our lives. Let's take that blessing and encourage others in this world that so desperately need that in their lives as well. Amen. You want to close us?
Sure, yeah.
Right.
Thanks, Pastor Carmen. I knew I didn't need to give too much of an altar call with 5 pastors in the room. Somebody would do it for me, so... Grateful for you guys all being here. I know the family, I know it means a ton. I don't know if you guys have even had a chance to turn around and see what this room looks like, but thanks for hanging in there too with just the spacing issues and all of that. Maybe there's something you wanted to share and you didn't get a chance because it's hard to get up here, or you don't want to do it in front of everyone, but you want to share that with a family member or a friend. That's part of how you honor Eric. It's part of why we're here. So feel free to stick around. We've got some goodies down there. And some coffee and all of that. Feel free to stick around and just share those thoughts and memories together. And thanks again for being here. Have a good day.